Okay, actually why I'm showing this is because this video is supposed to be part of my training for an upcoming live session or webinar in a community called Swift Cairo. And part of this is where I build a modular authentication module. I'm trying to make it as modular as I can, and I'm talking like installing like infinite number of authentication providers. So yeah, I'm a Friends fan if that's not really obvious. Okay, so this is basically what we were discussing, and I'm gonna keep this aside. So let's open this one and let's start our session. Okay. Okay, so now we're here. So as you can see that we have infinite numbers of, what's going on, of authentication providers, and what we're trying to do here is building a login view, and what we're going to do here is actually not discuss any MVVM, not discuss any MVP, any presentation, anything. What we're trying to do is build a modular authentication module as much as we can. And basically we are going to not follow me while I'm coding. Most of the stuff I'm going to do here is not basically coding, it's basically understanding what we're trying to do and discussing concepts. If you're wondering why we're going to do this, is because first, you're just not supposed to be a coder, and you're not really big when you code 10,000 lines of code. Actually, you're doing a pretty bad job at doing what you're supposed to do, because the less code there is in a file, the better. And you do that by following what is called solid principles. And still need to figure out how I'm gonna do it. Okay, let's write this. Okay. So we're trying to follow what is called solid principles. And the solid principles actually are a group of principles of what makes code better. Let me just write. And how code is better by doing less stuff. When any change comes in the future, you have less work to do, and when you are trying to replace something in the code, like for example, if you have we're going to get in this one, but let's try. If you are trying to remove a view controller from a whole flow, the whole flow continues. So I know this sounds crazy, but it is how it is. This is how your code becomes better and your software becomes flexible, and how your whole project becomes more scalable and fast. And this is something that I forgot to write in the blog post, but this is what we call design stamina. And that term is actually said by Martin Fowler. Martin Fowler said that design stamina is the activity of... Let me actually stop the video. Okay, so as you can see here in the screen, Martin Fowler had this hypothesis called design stamina. A design stamina is actually what happens in the background, and as you can see, there are 3 lines: the design payoff line, secret design, and the no design, or what we call here in our social language, or the meme language, if we want to say that, it's called spaghetti code. And spaghetti code is actually a group of anti-patterns, or a group of bad habits a coder or a programmer or someone who's working in the industry is taking thinking that what he is doing is actually making him fast, but that's not happening here actually. On the long run, you'll see that the graph is actually longer than the good design. And in here, what is happening is you, as the developer who is doing the bad habits, are actually fast, but that's momentarily, because at this spot you're gonna find yourself that you are hitting roadblocks, or code is actually fighting back. The bad habits are actually cramping and the code depth is getting higher. And this is basically where the code depth starts to come back at your neck and saying you need to pay your debt. So this is another example of what a code depth means. So basically is what you're trying to do here is actually be as fast as possible. Sorry, that's okay, never mind. So what you're trying to do here is basically be as fast as possible. So being fast doesn't mean to be productive at the beginning, but it's gonna be very, very, very productive in the long run. So people who are targeting longer lifespan for their projects should follow good design, should invest their time in that skill so they can have better salaries, jobs, projects, CV, or worker timeline or history of success. Because you're gonna learn why I'm saying all of these benefits if you read the blog series. But basically, because once you reach that point, the business team is gonna find that you have been really productive, other than the other version of you who's following no design. So you have both ways, and this is, by the way, called design stamina, because at the beginning you and the business team and the whole project is not really seeing that much of productivity, but on the long run you're gonna find that you are really, everything is just fitting into place. The features requests doesn't take time at all. Sometimes design or adding new major features doesn't take more than 1 week to implement. On the other side, if you are that guy, you'll find that if here is a feature, and for you, or maybe if it's here, and you to get to that point, you'll find that you have like work for like 1 month. So 1 month versus 1 week, that is a really big difference. So what we're going to discuss here is that we are going to discuss the strategy pattern with the authentication, just to get a feel of that. So let's ask ourselves, actually I haven't prepared my notes until now, so let's stop here. Okay, so in the last video I told you that I'm preparing some notes, and in the current video that we're doing at the moment is that we will be talking in deep why did we choose strategy pattern, why are we doing this, and what is this. We're going to explain what we're doing. So first, why are we doing this, and that has been answered in the last video. And second, why strategy pattern. Okay, so let's explain what is a strategy pattern in plain English, as simple as possible. So a strategy or strategy pattern is a pattern that targets user behavior that can be done in multiple ways, but the end goal is one. So I can log in with email, I can log in with phone, or my Face ID, or a QR code scanning, or my Facebook, Google, Apple, LinkedIn, or whatever. Maybe I can log in as a guest because I don't want to share my data, but at somewhere I'm going to use a builder pattern to build all of what I'm seeing in one line of code, and that line of code depends on class, a function. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is that we're targeting to make something really modular, really scalable, and can live longer. So By doing so, we're gonna implement the solid principles. Okay, so sorry. Let's start with the why. Why? Because a user can log in with multiple ways or multiple strategies. So I'm gonna use the strategy pattern here. Second is that it conforms to all the solid principles. Third, it is a KISS, or keep it simple, stupid. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, if it's stupid simple, I'm not calling it anything. I'm sorry. So let's dig deep. So let's try to identify the solid acronyms inside the given diagram. Okay. So the solid is the single responsibility is the most notable one, because as you can see here is that the email is handled here, the phone is handled there, and the Face ID, the QR code, and etc. until you reach the guest, which is so it's all provider. Then you have the what we were gonna call the open close. So what is an open close? An open close is that you create the code once and then you forget about it until you need to add something more without changing the closed one. So it's open for extension, closed for modification. So once I ship, for example, the app was just only the email and phone, if I wanted to add the Face ID, I don't have to change any of the email or phone, because if I did that, I would finally that I have broken the single responsibility as well, because if I had to change this and also change this one is changing for two reasons. Okay, so I'm changing it to adapt my code to the new thing that I have added, and then I am also changing it for something that it shouldn't be changed for. So I'm changing it for two reasons. I'm not changing it, for example, I'm changing Face ID, but Face ID doesn't have to do anything with phone. So I'm changing it for two reasons here. And also I'm doing extra work. So the O here is my most favorite one in the whole principles, because I have to do less work. The third one, which is less scope substitution, and you're gonna find that here, because if the user wanted to use the email provider, I can only use the email provider. But if I happen to replace the email provider with Apple's provider, I don't have to worry because the system would work. But if you're asking questions like how can that ever happen, or how would it magically happen, there's no magic in it. It's just a protocol here that is called authentication strategy, and every one of those is a strategy of itself. So when the user presses a button in the login here, like for example login by Apple, it will go into this pipeline and triggers the Apple provider without affecting any of the other providers and without affecting any of the system. So it's isolated with its own work. From here, because this is a really important principle in testing, I can also put a fake provider in the testing to test some behavior. And just for the sake of simplicity for me, to think what I'm going to say, and for you to understand what I'm saying, I'm just gonna call, if I say fake or stub or mock, all of these are basically the same thing in the design or diagram that we're seeing here. But in real life, they're not. Everyone has its use case. And since one of the goals of this channel is to be why driven, why we're doing this is because stuff has its uses, for fake has its uses, mock has its uses, but it's not really clear in here. So I'm not gonna go over it when I'm going over diagrams, okay? In the interface segregation, it's not also clear here, but the most one to be beneficial of it is the email and phone, because every one of those is just either login once or login register, and that's it. But if it's going to be email, the email is going to be login, register, forget password, forget email, reset password, reset email, or all of the anything related to email is going to be in that provider. And the job of that provider is to provide the authentication service with the action it needs. So, for example, if I have forgotten my password, I know who the guy to go to as an authentication service, and that is the email provider. So, coming from this point, the email provider is the guy to go to when this happens. And the email provider knows how to do this, so he maybe calls back and maybe he clears some cache, maybe he fetches some local data, whatever your business or your use case here implies, you should follow in that email provider. So maybe I just talk to a backend, maybe I just talk to Firebase, then notify the backend, or otherwise the backend does this for me. It all depends on you. So last and my most favorable one, which is the dependency inversion. The dependency inversion is what you see here, and to look closely, I'm talking about these arrows. All the arrows are going inside the authentication strategy, making it really modular, because if you see, they all depend on it. No one depends on anything but it. So the authentication strategy is implemented by all of these, and it's also a really strong dependency between the authentication service and the strategy. But the strategy doesn't know anything about what it calls back its data or its events or its results. So it just takes the action, performs it, the result throws it back, like I'm doing here, results back. It doesn't know who is throwing it back to. So at the back of mine, I don't know what is going on. So I'm just giving it to whoever needs it, and that is what we call a weak reference or a weak communication. So that's why you're seeing it as dotted line. So coming from this one, if I want to move all of this into something else, take this logic and move it to every project I want to work on. Maybe I have made all the authentication providers in the world, I have integrated with them, and I want to provide the developers like us, me and you, maybe in the future you can do it if you want, a way or a mean to just contact this authentication service, and I ask it to log me in using, for example, email, or for example Reddit, or for example LinkedIn, or for example Meta. Maybe Facebook would have their own provider in the future, or maybe Snapchat, or anything. Just be creative here. You have extended this library to as much as you can go thanks to the open close, and you want to ship it, you can ship it, and basically all you have to do is just cut it and paste it in another project which has its own UI. But as you can find here, you're just actually taking a shortcut with 75% of the time, because all the time that you're gonna spend is just not here, it's just not in the login view, but in here, not even in the presentation, because that has its pattern as well. So you're gonna find that you cut, probably if you have a really complex feature request like this, you're gonna find it really easy. And as a team lead in the future, or if you're hearing me as a team lead, I'm not really team lead, but if a team lead in the future want to, cut on the time, he can assign developers to build the email, build the Face ID, build the blah 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 blah, just to cut the time needed to get this authentication feature to the light, and the business people will be happier. Okay, so this is what we wanted to discuss today, and I hope that you actually benefited at the least. And I'm really sorry if this took a lot of time, but couldn't cut it any longer. So, feel free.